So last week, Dutch broadcaster VPRO, along with NPO 3FM and NPO Innovation, held its first AI song contest. The results were interesting, to say the least, with some of the songs being rather catchy. But with AI, there's always more to it when it comes down to copyright and who owns the song. There is, at this time, so a lot of personal input when it comes to creating pieces of music with AI. But what effect is this going to have on the long term? Let's turn to Sam Tall with his take on this. Sam.
Hey, Peter.
How you doing?
That's good. So I thought this was interesting. The thing that I see a lot about when it comes to AI and music and the use of AI as a production tool is that perhaps at some point it's going to make songwriters obsolete, or music producers obsolete, or even artists themselves, human singers, human musicians obsolete. And I just don't buy that. The thing that really drives for me is that it's a tool, just like anything else, just like arpeggiators, just like synthesizers, sample libraries, all the sort of music synthesis that has been, part and parcel of advanced music for decades. This is just a new iteration of it on a more technologically advanced level. And we have to look at it that way. We can't think that it's going to supplant musicians.
Well, but the drum machine of the 80s did have that kind of effect. And that's one of the, when we start talking about that. But here's the other thing that's an aside, where I've seen some articles that were talking about where for brands, or ad agencies, where it's like, hey, we identified these parameters for our, soap company, and just type in the parameters and they can come up with a jingle, a 30-second jingle that works for different spots. And then they hit the remix button and it can generate 10 different versions.
I mean, yeah, they could go ahead and do that, but is it going to be as compelling as a pop song that is recognizable by the audience? I think that's really where the differentiator is. Already we're talking about the ad agencies and brands and even television shows and films that are using production library music, stock music, stuff that costs well under, just at most like a couple $100 to use in a national ad campaign. There's a certain efficiency of scale that comes along with that kind of a thing. And so I think that's sort of a race to the bottom that I'm happy to let the AI take. And as a, human culture generation machine, the creators in music, in film, in television, in art of all stripes are really good at adaptation. And I'm convinced that we're going to find ways to stay one step ahead of the computers in this race. And you know what? If a brand is intent on spending $50 to, soundtrack their ad, so be it. I'm not going to subject my clients to underpayment for something, whether it's, viable or not for them is not my concern anymore.
Right. And an interesting thing is also intellectual property, which you mentioned about the copyright. But now, even taking this one step further, is the celebrity avatars. And Sherry Hugh reported in her Water and Music blog, where she wrote, writing about Travis Scott and Grimes are working with software developers to build their digital doubles, often with gaming context in mind. So basically, we're seeing like the fully digital likeness of what Daft Punk started in real life years ago, and Tupac holograms. So now we have the digital likeness and more intellectual property. So you can create a Grimes can come up with an AI song and just use her digital likeness for something.
I mean, how is that any different from the way that cartoon characters, Disney characters, are licensed out for brand relationships, the way that the Muppets are currently in use by Facebook for their Portal product, the way that, we have merchandise around Cartoon Network, characters. And I don't see it as that different. The only difference being that it's connected to a human being, but so are those cartoons. Somebody designed that, somebody owns the rights to those images, and somebody owns the rights to the images of a human person as well. It's the person themselves, and we call that a likeness. So I don't see it as that different. I see, there's the argument that perhaps this gives more opportunity for a celebrity to appear in multiple places at once, makes it more accessible to have their participation in a campaign because they don't have to be physically present. The turnaround time can be shorter, the cost can be lower. Great. I think that's like a value add in a lot of ways, and it's not going to necessarily, negate the value of having a real person in the flesh. We still go to concerts. We have, we still go to the theater for Broadway plays. SpongeBob on Broadway was a huge success. Doesn't stop being a success just because we have SpongeBob on television,
And we have Frozen on Broadway, Frozen, the animated series. And a lot of it comes down to
hugely successful franchises.
And it also comes down to the actors and actresses that do the voice talent, and they influence their character into it. So there is that personal touch to it.
Well, and I'll say too, to that point, like Travis Scott, as a person, can have a conversation with somebody or present himself on a live stream, for example, but is he going to voice act an avatar, or is that going to be strictly for musical performance purposes? So it's not a one-to-one replacement.
Mm-hmm. So let's take this into the real world now and talk about some of the news with real people and real consequences and real issues. You sent me over to this article, and I happened to catch it, this Billboard article, which was very interesting, and something that's been going on since the fall of last year. The title of the article is Spotify Countersues Indie Label Alleging Massive Streaming Fraud and Millions of Fake Accounts. So the lead-in was that Sosa Entertainment founder Jake Noakes claimed the streaming service failed to pay royalties on over 550 million plays. Now Spotify says he designed a scheme to game the system. All right, we've heard about the gaming the system in the past, but there's more to this. And before we get into this, I want to give like a brief backstory on it. And
yeah, you're going to have to set this up.
Right, and by brief, it's still rather in-depth. So let's go back. Let's take the Wayback Machine into November of last year. He filed a lawsuit against Spotify for over $1 billion for failure to pay royalties on the 550 million streams through his company, Pro Music Rights, which they state is a performing rights organization, and claimed to have a 77.4% market share based on musical works, with the rights to license about 2 million works from artists, including A$AP Rocky, Wiz Khalifa, Pharrell, Young Jeezy, Nipsey Hussle, 2 Chainz, Migos, Gucci Mane, Fall Out Boy. The list goes on. And if you just do a Google search, and you can find this, it's all over Billboard, Music Business Worldwide, plenty of other sites, Yahoo. So this is something that's been going on for a while. He also claims that Merlin, which is a European global digital rights agency, wrongfully terminated its relationship with the label before recommending that a number of other streaming platforms, including Deezer, SoundCloud, Google Play, Saavn, and Vivo, also remove Sosa's catalog due to what Merlin itself is now describing, quote, fraudulent streaming activity. So to note is Merlin sold an equity stake in Spotify when Spotify floated on the stock exchange last April. Merlin's shares were believed to be worth over $100 million when the transaction was completed. Sosa alleges that the removal of its catalog from Spotify ensured that it didn't get to participate in the sale, which it says would have seen it receive tens of millions of dollars. So that's November. We're going to fast forward to March, when they filed an antitrust lawsuit against the quote-unquote music cartel, which includes Digital Media Association, National Religious Broadcaster Music License Committee, Radio Music License Committee, the National Association of American Wineries, and the Television Music License Committee. It's a lot to say there. He's gone after pretty much the entire industry. In an article on Music Business Worldwide, he stated, quote, "They have to explain why they are boycotting pro music rights and fixing prices for performance licenses." He adds, "We already sued Apple, Amazon, Google, YouTube, Spotify, 7 Digital, Deezer, iHeartMedia, Rhapsody, and SoundCloud in a New York federal court for copyright infringement, and they too have to tell the public why they are refusing to deal with pro music rights." And that's a quote. Now, Spotify stated in Billboard the other day that Sosa, quote, "designed a scheme to artificially generate hundreds of millions of fraudulent streams in order to manipulate Spotify's system to extract undeserved royalties at the expense of hardworking artists and songwriters. The filing, which is supported by screenshots of messages allegedly between him and a bot farmer, and charts that show streams on his music go up from 0 to hundreds of thousands in a matter of days, also alleges that Noak directed the bot farmer to create millions of fake accounts and change the names of the songs in his catalog to closely resemble those of established hit songs. Sam, there's a lot to unpack there, and I feel like I should just burn the whole suitcase. What's going on?
So I've heard from a number of different people that they're confused as to what even this character is all about and what his end game is, what his hopeful intent is. I mean, he's suing DSPs, he's suing music rights organizations that he claims are locking him out. I don't know too much personally, but I have had some side conversations over Facebook DM with Jake in the past. And he doesn't seem too concerned about the consequences. And he also doesn't seem too concerned about the cost of handling all this. I'll tell you one thing. We know at least one other shrewd business person who finds great value in the volume of negative press keeping the name on everybody's lips. I'm not naming any names, but I think we can all make some inferences. It's a winning strategy as far as publicity is concerned. And if that's the angle, I get it. Pro Music Rights claims to have signed up a bunch of clients pretty quickly and repeatedly during the course of all this sort of like media firestorm. And they operate on a sort of a TuneCore model that you pay a fixed fee and you keep 100% of your royalties. Look, it's not a bad business model. I just think it's really bad ethics. But we'll let the courts decide if it's actually civil or criminal action. I think Spotify's got an easy win if they can prove fraudulent activity, and that just shuts the whole thing down and he loses every chip he ever bought.
One thing to note is when I mentioned we were talking about the cartel, and one was the National Religious Broadcast and Music Licensing Committee, and also they just struck a deal. It was in March when that lawsuit was filed, and it was a month later they just struck a deal. So there are things happening, and what I can say is, yes, if he's going after streaming services for not paying or paying enough fair rate, that's an ongoing battle, and yes, the creators should definitely be paid more. This process, though, it's going to unravel more. And, how far down the rabbit hole is this going to go?
I wish I knew, because you know what, if there's a victorious resolution for Pro Music Rights or Sosa Entertainment at the end of this, I wish I could see into the future and copy it myself. But I don't think that's exactly where this is going. I don't think that's what's gonna end up happening. And I think it's a pretty quick way to get blacklisted by an entire industry just by being, young and naive and litigious all at once. It doesn't earn you very many favors.
That, and it's School of Hard Knocks. You can find out that way. So thank you, Sam, for your insights on that. It's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds over the next week, for however long this is going to go. Once it gets tied up in the court system, it's going to be really interesting. So,
but I'll tell you what, I have needed new drama entertainment. I'm kind of like wearing thin on the stuff that's interesting on Netflix and Disney Plus and everything else. So if this can happen over the next couple of weeks, it'll keep me pretty entertained. So I'd appreciate it if Spotify and Pro Music Rights would really kind of like get to it for my sake.
Maybe they can make a documentary. This could be the Tiger King of the music industry.
I will back that. I will put my money into the Kickstarter for that.